You're listening to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Hello, welcome to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Its purpose is to dissect horror films, both old and new. We've had a little bit of a mini hiatus just while we're going through the whole kind of all the horrible stuff that's kind of going on in the real world outside. And we hope that you are all safe and well and keeping in lockdown. What are you doing to entertain yourselves in lockdown? Are you a horror enthusiast? I'm presuming you are tuning in to our podcast, but what are you doing to kind of while the hours away while you're in kind of self-isolation as we are here in Australia at the moment? We are trying to pick things up as I said, with the Wes Craven middle years, kind of, or what I've dubbed the nightmare years, and trying to kind of tee those ones up to round out our season dedicated to the late great film director. And it seems just a ripe time to kind of revisit and look at The People Under the Stairs, which was a much loved classic in its time. Does it still stand the test of time? Would we recommend it to a modern going audience? That's part of our process here with the Surgeons of Horror podcast team, of which I should probably introduce ourselves. I'm your lead host, Saul Muerte, and joining me to co-host for this particular podcast episode is Watch It Wombat's very own Nick Alford. Welcome aboard, Nick.
Thank you, mate. Good to be here as always.
Yeah, it's good to have you on board. I know in recent times we have tended to stick to the Stephen King kind of stuff, but we're taking a rare break for you. From all accounts, it sounds like this was a bit of one of your favorites when you were younger. I'm kind of hesitant to say that. I don't want to put words in your own mouth, but it's one that resonates with you, you know. So hence why we had you on board. Am I right in that, or?
Oh, 100%. It's kind of up there for me with. I think at that age, I guess it's kind of like Goonies, almost, but horror. You know, because I think there's a kid who was, I guess, a similar age to me at the time. You know, as a lead actor, which is always pretty rare to get in a horror movie.
Yes.
You know, I was like 11 when it came out, so it felt a bit more accessible having there's someone you can sort of associate yourself with and all the things they do. And I've always just had this thing for not necessarily even haunted house movies, just houses that have like secret trapdoors and, you know, secret. I think it's grown up in England with the Tudors and how they'd have like the priest, you know, holes, I think they were called, with the passages and secret ways in and out.
I know.
I always thought that's so cool to be able to sneak around. And this, for me, it's I know now, watching it as an adult, why it did appeal to me so much as a kid, because without going into it too much, it's a lot more slapstick than I remember it being.
Yes. Yes.
But definitely one of my childhood favourites.
Well, that's, as I said in the lead up to, that's kind of one of the things that we here at Surgeons of Horror kind of look into is like, yes, these things kind of often have a nostalgic element to them, and that's why they hold quite dear to our hearts. And in this case, this seems like one of them. But I guess the rub is the second part of that question is, you know, when we go back and revisit them, does that memory still hang on? Does it still ignite the flames of yesteryear? And is it enjoyable still? And with that, would you then recommend it to a modern going audience? And I'm not going to ask that question of you just yet, because we'll get to that towards the end of our discussions. But, you know, it has interesting results, because there's times in, you know, our team have had films that we've discussed about, which has indeed kind of ticked those boxes for what it did to us when we first watched them. But when we come round to revisiting those films, it sadly lacks. And you're just like, well, what was it that triggered you at that time? You know, and why does that hit the mark now? You know, so it'd be kind of interesting and that's basically what I'd like us to kind of explore in our chat, rather than kind of, you know, some podcast listeners who've followed us in the past, sometimes our rule of thumb is that we stick to the narrative, but you and I often deviate away from that and talk about the themes and stuff, which I'm really happy to explore within this, particularly with this one, because there's lots of interesting elements that come up within this film that warrant discussion, I feel. But before we kind of get into the nitty gritty, I haven't really spoken about your background, Nick, for those, because it's been a while that you have come on board, and I do want to give your own film kind of discussion website, Watch It Wombat, a bit of a heads up. So just for the listeners out there, who are you and what is Watch It Wombat and where can they find you?
Oh, hey, mate, I'll just put it briefly. It's a movie blog, mostly on Instagram. Just post very short mini reviews, and we sometimes are lucky enough to interview a few celebrities here and there because we have lovely mates over at Supernova who help us out. So we're just starting to grow our YouTube. So if you get a chance, follow us on YouTube, Watch It Wombat. Apart from that, just the love of movies, and I guess that stemmed from me as a little kid sitting there watching horror movies I shouldn't be watching as well.
Yes, that's right. I mean, I actually kind of want to just promote Watch It Wombat a little bit more because particularly Instagram reviews out there, I do recommend people kind of, even if you just follow these guys on the Instagram review stuff, because they just cut to the point. They're very kind of short, kind of sweet reviews, and they're a good indicator if you're kind of oscillating whether or not to kind of watch something. Particularly, I don't know if you're going to start moving into reviewing some of the more on-demand kind of reviewing stuff while we're in lockdown mode, Nick. I don't want
to. There's plenty of that we have done. Yeah. We've got relationships with Netflix and Disney Plus, and they give us early screenings. So yeah, we do try and do some of those, especially now. When what else are you going to do apart from sit there and watch stream movies all day?
Exactly right. So yeah, if you are kind of stuck at home and not sure what to do, give these guys a quick kind of look on Instagram and see if they've already reviewed your film, because that might kind of sway you or not. But yeah, check them out. So awesome to have you on board, Nick, as I said. And I know we've often discussed about the horror stuff in the past. We've kind of delved from the likes of The Howling and American Werewolf in London. We did a little bit of a werewolf vibe, I should say, with you in the past, amongst other stuff as well. A couple of Stephen King numbers in there that we chatted about as well, as we said. So let's get to Wes Craven's The People Under the Stairs then. And we're picking this up. So from we've been following Wes Craven and his work on the podcast here for a little while, and what I've dubbed the nightmare years. And we have kind of basically that stems from the very beginning of the first film, A Nightmare on Elm Street, that he did. Oh, that's because it's on. And then from there, we have then been going to talk about some of the other films that were in between that, not just about the Nightmare on Elm Street. So there was a TV movie Chiller. There was Deadly Friend, Serpent and the Rainbow, Shocker, and we're now up to the point where people understand just before we kind of come back to when Wes Craven returns with a new nightmare. So, People Under the Stairs. So, Nick, talk us through your first memories of watching this. When and you were saying you were 11. So, do you have a precise memory of it, or was it kind of a bit of a blur? Where were we up to with you, and why did it resonate so much for you as an 11-year-old?
Pretty precise, sort of what I touched on before, with just having a kid like that in a horror movie who felt a little, bear in mind I'm not growing up in the ghettos. It still felt like a relatively realistic character and relatable. And he was also, he had a really good moral compass, I think. Like, he wasn't one of those sort of bratty kids, and he felt like he had, especially his relationship with the girl in the film as well. It felt very genuine. Yeah, I agree.
I agree.
And yeah, for me as a kid, it was great with all the traps, and like I say, very Goonies-esque for me. And I think we just watched it on video. One of the bigger VHSs you get from the video libraries back in the day.
Yeah.
The big chunky plastic ones.
That's right.
And we were just watching it again, like most of my horror movies as a kid, probably rented by my mate's older brother.
Yep.
And we just got up early first in the morning to watch it before anyone else woke up, and then went back to bed before anyone else knew. And rewound the videotape. There
was no evidence.
That's it. Yeah. Unless you forget to rewind the tape, and then you're in trouble. Leave it in the recorder. Ask your parents, kids. But yeah, for me, it's a very vivid memory for me. But then looking back on the film, I think I must have seen it quite a few times, because I was remembering more and more watching it now. Going, oh yeah, that stuff we used to, emulate as kids or talk about as kids, or it was. I was surprised actually for such a small film.
Yeah,
it was very popular, and that's why when you talked about doing a possible podcast for this, I was all on board. I'm glad you are, and that's the thing. I'm often finding, I just
from my own personal journey through horror films is that I was so kind of immersed in it at a young age that I don't really kind of recall when I first watched stuff. So it's not really like it's, like these kind of big moments for me when I'm watching it. I just remember the feeling of watching the film, I guess. Yeah, you're right. But the slapstick component was something that I kind of forgotten about. I just remembered, like, the main bit I kind of remembered was just kind of like the burrowing behind the walls and stuff and kind of ferreting around and stuff. I did remember Brandon Adams, the dude that plays Fool, our kind of lead protagonist in it, mainly because, like, he was in a lot of stuff around that time. Like, some people may know him from the Michael Jackson Moonwalker kind of film feature kind of that he did.
Whatever that was.
Yeah, but like he was in Mighty Ducks as well. He's one of the kid players. Yeah. So some kids our age may kind of associate him more with that. But yeah, he was one of those people that you just knew. His face cropped up in a lot of like kind of teeny stuff like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. He was in a couple of episodes of that as well and things like that. It was essentially he was a big kind of kid actor at the time, and very kind of. And you can see why he was getting parts, because he's a solid performer even in this. Like he's the character of Ford is believable, and it needs to be because he's the heart of the film. And as you said, like he's our journey through it. So we as 11-year-olds, we're a similar age. So we as 11-year-olds watching this would have really connected with the kid and his plight. What I found interesting rewatching it though is there's a lot of repetition through it from a story structure. Like, they often he's in or out or under or within the crevices of this house. And even like the last act is when he comes back into it, he's choosing to go back into hell, so to speak, to revisit his demons and go, and stand up or be his own person. And maybe that's a point of discussion now, actually, because when we look at the story arc of Fool, like he's at the beginning, we see him in an impoverished house. We're talking very much about African American culture here, like you said, in the ghettos, very kind of poor, impoverished family. They're being kind of ripped off by their own kind of landlords or people that own the block, which of course are your white American kind of people. Ving Rhames' kind of earliest roles, actually, and I'm just trying to remember the dude's name in it, but his character name, which I'm kind of losing.
No, I can't remember either.
Leroy. But it's Leroy.
Yeah.
But like, so he's, even though there's this kind of patriarchal figure that's there, in the Ving Rhames character, he's not somebody that you would want to have as a patriarchal figure, but that's who Fool has to lean on. And it's in the process of going through this, he almost has to adultify himself, I guess, in order to become and stand on his own 2 feet in order to get through the ordeal to then survive at the end, if that makes sense. So I just found his journey really quite an interesting one in of itself.
Definitely, because he's very mature in it as well. Because I think for me, it's a really interesting journey, and he's very mature in it, and with a role model like Ving Rhames. Yeah, and Ving Rhames and the other guy. Yes, Ving Rhames' partner in crime. That's it. Like those are the two people he's kind of got to, as those father figures sort of thing.
Yeah.
And especially when you see Fool at the start walking up the stairs and just the stairways packed with drug addicts and God knows what else. I think that sort of side of things with the landlord might have been lost on me a little bit as a kid, but again, it's kind of it's that kind of Goonies motif where, the big bad man's trying to take away the house and we've got to go and find some gold to get it all sorted.
Yeah, gold's always the answer.
That's it.
So I was going to start. So I think I'm deviating slightly for a second because we're kind of slightly touching on it, because one of the things that critically people have looked at with this film is that this totally went over my head as a kid, I have to say. Didn't even blip on my radar, but the kind of class warfare kind of that's going on within this film, but also with that, how thickly it's painted on. The moral of the film, as it were, is really quite saturated. That there isn't a lot of breathing space around that topic, I guess. A lot of people have lambasted it for it, but like I said, at the time, that was not. It didn't really hit me that it was like that. I presume you're coming from a similar point of view.
Definitely. Especially until sort of like the end, where everyone's gathering around, and then money starts falling from the sky. I mean, we'll take it without spoil, right?
Spoil away, man. Look, we're presuming like if people have tuned into this, then you hopefully have watched it, and that's why you're coming in to listen to us rattle on about it. Definitely spoil away.
Yeah, but that's where I think that's why critics may have had a problem with it, is just towards the end when it does really drive that message home. But for me, it didn't add or take away anything. It was just another, gave them a real reason to all rally around, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And that's exactly where I was from. And even when I re-watched it ahead of the podcast, I was observing that, but I didn't think it was as blatantly. I mean, it is, but it's not. I don't think it was enough to jar you from the story, I guess.
No.
Yeah, so that was kind of my take on that kind of criticism of it. The other big thing to probably look at is the Twin Peaks factor that's associated with this, because the two of the co-stars, Everett McGill. I don't know if you look up that dude's face, right, as he is. I don't know what's the picture on Wikipedia that I kind of looked at just to get his kind of credentials. It's taken from San Diego Comic Con. 2017, but that photo, like, he looks like a mean fucker. I would cast him within a heartbeat to just be this kind of absolute bastard of a character. But like, my association with him more than anything, has been from Twin Peaks. I grew up absolutely devoted to Twin Peaks. That to me was a real eye opener to storytelling in a fresh new way. And I know I was like, when Twin Peaks came out originally in 1990, it was roughly around the same time as this, that it was originally on air. So, and I was in deep with it and mesmerized with this crazy fucking series. But yeah, so he played Big Ed Hurley from that, one of the main kind of characters within that, and his wife in that as well. Was actually his co-star in this as well, Wendy Roby, and she played Nadeem, his partner in the Twin Peaks series as well. Very quirky, eccentric kind of characters within Twin Peaks, and boy, did they take that quirkiness into this film and own and then some. What are your takes on their characters? I mean, Twin Peaks aside, but what are your take on their characters within this? Because essentially, like, they are the token white representatives. If we don't if we move the police force to one side, they're the only kind of white Americans that we see. They're obviously made their money kind of off other people. So, but we get this window into these kind of weird, like, eccentric kind of brother-sister relationship that teeters on kind of incest in places, particularly when Everett McGill's character comes out with the old SMN kind of gear.
The gimp mask,
the gimp mask kind of component, which I might touch on in a sense on the side in a second, but just want to get your thoughts on their characters and what do you think they're supposed to represent within this mad world or horror world within these confined walls that we kind of meet them.
I mean, I actually, again, they were part of the slapstick element, that really I noticed more second time round, and I think that's again, probably why I enjoyed it more as a kid, because seeing those two as the mother-father figure, I guess, as adults, you know, being bad and, you know, being the bad guys was quite interesting. And I think for me, they obviously represent like the man putting everyone down, because I think they talked about how they've been doing it for years, and I think it's like their father before them, and it's like it's an old house, it's
generation
stuff in it. Generations. So I think that's more like the old money. Is kind of what they're getting at with that one. But yeah, for me, it's I was definitely freaked out by them as a kid. I think the mother figure, she had a very much sort of Zelda from a Pet Sematary quality about her, that sort of spindly, screamy, shouty kind of thing that did freak me out. And then, as you know, not be seeing a geezer dressed in a gimp mask running around the house, you know, was definitely. I think for me, at being slightly claustrophobic, I loved the idea of him having a choice between facing a geezer in a gimp mask with a shotgun, running down the corridor, or potentially jumping into a vent with someone dragging a creepy doll behind them in a house that's you know, inherently creepy anyway. And him making those little decisions as a kid, and then what he does after that. I think for me, both those again, probably I've got rose-tinted glasses on, but I think both those characters were caricatures.
Yes, they definitely were. Yeah,
but it also felt like if they're willing to imprison people under the stairs, that's the last place you want to be, you know, and that's it's either death or that's what you've got to look forward to. Do you know what I mean? I think that's the alternative. It's not just getting caught; it's what they do with you once you get caught. And I think that's the scary part as well. It's not just death; it's turning into one of those geezers, you know, which was pretty creepy at the time as well. The guys, you know, the emancipated faces and the gaunt, you know, gaunt look about them. But yeah,
So what do you think it's saying with the gimp mask kind of component though to it? Because you know, like, you know, the fact that it's almost like he has to take on another personality in order to kind of go out and get his kicks. And his kicks in this case isn't actually sexual in nature; it's violent. What's your take on that? Like, what do you think that's supposed to be saying? Is that meant to be saying something, or is it just meant to be purely just for the visual effect of it?
I hadn't really thought of it as saying something, because I think if he was into that kind of stuff, it's weird because he's submissive and then he's not, and then he hits her, and that wasn't very consistent. But I think I'd imagine from the horror point of view, it was probably just to give it a scary mask. And like you say, you know, I think it's, if you want to look for meaning in it, I guess it'd be they portray, like, for example, to the police, they portray this couple of, you know, husband and wife. Yes, we're in a big house and we're happy, blah, blah, blah. And then behind closed doors, it's a different life, namely putting on leather and running around the house shooting people, which no one complains about the shotgun noises and all the rest of it.
No, that's right. That's right. I often thought that, you know.
Yeah.
They're calling up that racket again.
How about you, mate? Did you see more to it than that?
Not at the time, but I just, when I was rewatching, I was just wondering if I was going to take something from it, I would probably say that a lot of this is stuff that, you know, is behind closed doors and stuff. So they paint a certain picture when they're outside. So when the cops come in, everything's sweet and light, you know. So behind closed doors, we all have our kind of own secrets and kind of fetishes and what have you. And I think that, if anything, may have been a commentary just on that alone. Not with any kind of much kind of depth to it, just purely as a sweeping statement. And you know,
like she's literally baking them cookies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, you know, if you're gonna kind of liken it to David Lynch again, but like the whole Blue Velvet kind of white picket fences stuff, painted in that, you know. So like we are looking at or they only allow a certain image to be kind of displayed, and even the dark stuff that's supposedly going on is behind these kind of Warren like kind of stuff behind the walls and stuff. And under the house, obviously they have this kind of I don't even know if are they supposed to be people that they kidnapped over the time. the people that actually live under the stairs, sorry, in the house. Is that right?
As far as I understand, they wanted a boy, so as the daughter inverted commas was saying, you know, they tried to get a boy, but you know, one would talk too much, or you know, one would be rude, and then they'd get put downstairs, and I think that's how Roach lost his tongue.
Yes, that's right. So, and with that, so we should probably talk about Roach. That's as well. That's another great kind of character actor in Sean Whalen. So, like,
it's good.
He's been in bloody so many things. But from
hard to name off the top of your head, though.
Yeah, hard to name off the top of your head. But like more recently, he cropped up in Free from Hell. Just again, Rob Zombie likes to pull from people from yesteryear that resonate. He's so people may have seen him in that as Burt Willie in that. But yeah, he's been in like so many things. Just Google the guy. He's just got one of those faces that you just go, oh fuck yeah, that dude.
So I was going to say he's one of the aspects of the movie, him and the people under the stairs.
Yeah.
That, you know, as a young kid, not being too familiar with twists.
Yes.
It was great to see something that was, you know, oh wow, this is terrifying. Oh, this is creepy.
Yeah.
And then realizing that they are just normal people who've been put in a bad situation.
Yeah.
And so whether or not, again, that's a metaphor for underprivileged people.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know.
Sorry to talk over you there. So there's an interesting comparison on we just not so long ago in this season on our podcast, we spoke about Clive Barker's Nightbreed. And in that, the concept of the story of that is that there are these monsters that live in our world, but the real monsters are humans. And these monsters that we meet have been kind of forced underground to live a life of secrecy. So there is a kind of similar comparison here where what we determine as monsters or something horrific, these creatures that have been forced to live in the dark under the stairs of this or under the basement of this house and have become deformed or uglified, if you will, within the house, people that we would normally associate with being scared of, you know, like don't go into the basement, you know, or those old horror cliches, are in fact have a more human side to them than the people that reside upstairs, which are, you know, the quirky two brother and sister family that we spoke about. So there is that kind of going on, which is, as you said, plays on the whole twist component that you were talking about, which has a cool kind of little, like you say, it's a twist that from a modern audience probably see it coming, but from back in the day, it was an interesting kind of take on things. If we look at the story structure, if we looked at it as in its basic form. With a 3-act structure. So the first act is obviously kind of setting up the character of Fall and his predicament, which we kind of spoke about. And then the second act, which is primarily the bulk of it, is him going into hell for the first time and his experiences of that and having to live through that ordeal and finally get out and away, to only then come with the climax, which is the third act, having to kind of set things right, go back and rescue the Alice character, which we haven't really spoken about, the token kind of daughter character who's been made to almost be quite androgynous from the parents, because as you said, they've always wanted a boy. So there's this kind of androgyny kind of associated with her. She's played by AJ Langer, again one of these kind of kid actors who was pretty kind of successful during the 90s. For me, like outside of this, she was always associated as Rayanne from My So-Called Life. Again, like I'm a bit, sometimes I have this horror kind of side of me, yes, but I also kind of fell into the whole D&M kind of stuff that was around in the 90s. My So-Called Life was one of them. fell head over heels infatuated with Claire Danes at the time, but that's an aside.
I remember that, yeah.
And but also, like combined with that, it was also the Dawson's Creek kind of time. So that's the period that we're talking about, and there was a lot of these kind of teen kind of dramas that were around, and I was at the right age to kind of connect with that. And so she was great in that, and so when I rewatched this, I was like, oh my God, yeah, of course, that's AJ Langer from such and such. Awesome performance again in this. I think she kind of, it is a fine line of playing kind of meek, but not too meek, I guess, because she does have strength to it. It's just that she's been forced into a situation that she can't see out of. And it takes a fool to come in and rescue her, which is...
Yeah, and it's good because she does sort of get her strength back at the end, doesn't she? And she does kind of take control.
Yeah, that's right. She does, and that and she does assert herself, which is often the case when you see like heroines kind of rise. I guess particularly in horror films as well. It's normally the heroine that we kind of connect with. But she does. She has to confront. Well, the true villain is the mum, the mum character in this, because the dad, Everett McGill's character, the daddy character in this is pretty much he's the brute force, but he just does the mum's character's bidding essentially, and it takes Alice to confront the mum in this and stand up again in order to kind of rise out of this. What else I want to kind of touch on? The slapstick component, we were talking about that earlier on. It wasn't such a big thing when we watched it as kids. It probably kind of had the entertainment value. When you watch it now, does that slapstick component have a negative effect when you watch it now? Is it too farcical, do you think? Or do you think it still sits with that kind of right balance of entertainment?
For me, it's just when it does go slapstick, it goes quite full on, like the slide down the stairs. It's like almost. It'd be hard watching it as an adult now for the first time because I don't think I'd be scared by it.
Yeah.
I think I'd enjoy it as a bit of fun. I'd probably see it more as like a black comedy.
Yeah, sure.
Because it doesn't go too heavy with the horror. It's not like there's, too many bodies being dismembered from memory.
No,
but it's not like something that would actually, like when I watched Insidious, like as an adult, that freaked me out. With this, I just don't think it's in that genre. I think it's somewhere in between, like a black comedy or horror.
Yeah,
it's definitely good fun.
I think you're right there too. So and if we kind of bring Wes Craven back into the fold, like he's obviously associated with horror, and he was a master in creating horror. But he was always tried to shift away from horror because his true kind of calling that he felt was to do with more with satire and comedy. And you see elements of that here. And his follow-up film from this would be Wes Craven's A New Nightmare, which probably is your case in point of how to do satire in an effective way.
And of course Scream as well.
And then Scream would obviously elevate that beyond, So it's kind of, it's interesting if you then look at his transgression, I guess, as he's coming through this. This is the point where he has put that first foot on the rung of that ladder, I guess, to then kind of, take him to where he essentially all he wanted to do of combining the horror and satire element in a perfect way.
Yeah.
So it is interesting watching Wes Craven's kind of journey through that and where he's at now. And just to kind of touch on his writing process when it comes to this. And I found that this was quite a common theme with Wes Craven. And when he comes to writing scripts and stuff, because he was inspired by a column in the papers for this when he was coming to put this together. And basically the concept of it was a couple of guys breaking into a house and they found these really kind of pale looking children locked inside it. Essentially that was the germ of the idea. But it seems like he was obviously a reader of the paper a lot, because it reminds you of the very first film that he put together, which was Last House on the Left, that was also born out of an article he read in the paper. And even A Nightmare on Elm Street, the character of Freddy Krueger was kind of loosely, or the concept behind it was loosely based on these people that appeared to be dying in their sleep. So he often kind of, that's where he gets his kind of ingredients, if you will, and then he kind of goes away and writes stuff. Interesting thing again, though, is that the final two acts, that when he came to write it, because he kind of had a loose idea and it kind of sat there with it for a little while, came to him in a dream again. Like, so he's and I think we may have touched this in the past, but like in some of the other podcasts, but he must have been very connected with like lucid dreaming. So for those that aren't aware of what that is, it's essentially being able to kind of come out or manipulate your dreams in a way to act in a certain way. And not only that, when you wake up, have it fresh in your mind so that you can kind of sit down and write about it. But it seems like that was a process that helped him in his work. But so I found that kind of interesting that those kind of themes do kind of creep up for him when he's writing stuff. And the other thing, before we kind of talk about our views of rewatching it today and how it feels to us now, and whether we would recommend it to a modern going audience, and bow out for our final kind of conversation on the podcast, just want to kind of take a quick nod to a couple of the other co-stars that kind of cropped up in it as well, because we have a grandpa kind of figure in there, of Fool's grandpa, if you will. He was played by Bill Cobbs, and he is again one of those characters or actors that if you see him, you just go, "Oh, dude, I know that guy."
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, he's awesome. And like, I remember him from the Cotton Club, I think, more than anything, as Big Joe, the Big Joe character in that. Like I said, he's been in like 100 other things. New Jack City, he was in New Jack City as well. I remember him from that. A bunch of other stuff. But yeah, go you again, check him out, because you look at him up and you go, "Oh yeah, I know who you mean." Oh, he was in. Oh no, yeah. He was in Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead as well. He's the dude that worked.
Oh, that's a classic.
Yeah. Sorry, just had a moment where he jumped into my mind. I was like, yeah, awesome film. And the other,
for me, it's more Demolition Man. I always remember him in that.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. Of course, I've forgotten that. Yeah, he's the main cop captain dude, isn't he?
Yeah, the one who's from his time.
Yeah. And the other person I just want to mention is Kelly Jo Minter. We've spoken about her in a previous podcast. In fact, in this season, with their Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child, where she was one of the, no, she wasn't a victim. She actually survived in it, but she was one of the Freddy's, what do I want to say? People that he would try and torment throughout it. So we've spoken about her in the past as well in the films, but she was cropped up in Lost Boys as a bit of a minor character in that as well, and a bunch of other stuff. So yeah, just want to kind of mention her. As I said, we've spoken about it. We both agreed that it resonated with us when we were young. Did you rewatch it again ahead of the podcast, or were you just going off your memories of it, mate?
No, I rewatched it again. Unfortunately, a couple of weeks ago, so I'm still trying to remember parts of it here and there. But yeah, on rewatch, I think as I said before, I still really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But I think I would definitely recommend it to modern viewers.
Okay.
But I'd say I wouldn't recommend it as you're going in for a solid horror scare. I reckon you're going in for like a creepy house comedy with some, there's some scary little moments in there, like shotgun suddenly blast through a wall, or it's I think there's enough to it. I think it's all, I also like the idea of going back into the house. It's always very much just get out, and so once he's out and free and he can live his life, he does the right thing. He calls cops and
that's right. They come and
like I feel like he makes good choices, which for me is essential in any horror movie. Is that the lead character makes good choices. If they do something ridiculous or stupid, or you're like, oh well, they probably deserve what they get. But again, because he's such a good character. I like the fact he goes in and does try and rescue her and the other people in it.
Yeah, that's right. And I want to echo that as well. I did like the fact that he, as a character, has the choice of leaving it, but chooses to go back, which I think says a lot about his character. And I think that's something that really, I don't know. I don't remember how much that resonated with me at the time when I first watched it, but it stuck with me more recently with this viewing. And that component, I really appreciated that. And I can imagine that being quite fresh at the time. If I was a little bit older and I understood it a bit more, that component would have had more of an impact on me.
I'd say suspend your disbelief as well, because there's moments where, oh wow, he gets changed quickly, or they manage to end up there quickly, or there's shotgun holes in the wall and the police haven't noticed them, or there's little things that don't put that hat on if you're going to watch it. Switch your brain off.
Yes. Oh, yeah, it definitely is like that. So I guess that before we bow out, I'll just like you. So you've got a couple of kids yourself, Nick. So would you get your kids to watch this, or because we're talking about when we watched it when we were 11, and I'm not talking about from that kind of point of view. You know that sometimes there are movies like horror movies that you could get away with showing your kids. And it not being too, does it fall into that category, or do you think it's still got too much of the dark component with that to associate it or show it to kids? What do you think? So, some people talk about Poltergeist, for example, being something that you could theoretically show your kids. It is scary, but it's not got too much in there to kind of warp a kid's mind, I guess.
I know what you mean. I'd also think what it doesn't do as well is that psychological stuff. It's the what you don't see kind of material that I think actually really. I know people think kids are scared of monsters and all that sort of stuff. I don't think they are. I think a lot of the time, it depends on the kid, obviously. I think that if they see something, okay, well they know that's not real. But I think I mentioned the podcast before. My kids were nagging me to watch Jaws. And
that's right. Yeah, Jaws is a better example. And
then as soon as she's getting pulled apart and actually in real life breaking a rib while she's doing it in the water, screaming, my kids just turned around and started screaming, "Turn it off! Turn it off!"
Yes.
And again, you can't see a shark; it's just a woman in the water. There's not really any of that here, and I think I was watching it with that in mind because my kids love watching stuff they shouldn't really be watching. And I was like, I think so. Will's 12. I think he might enjoy it, but then, if he doesn't watch it now, maybe when he's 14, 15, 16, it might just seem a bit dumb. To him at that age, I think. And then
that's right.
So I don't know. I mean, it might be. It's one of those things. At least you can always turn it off. I've never taken my kids to. Something they probably should be seeing at the movies because then you've got to walk out. Okay, maybe this isn't quite for you. You gauge the room, but I hope maybe they should because it is good fun.
It's just something that played with my mind. Just literally as we were talking about our entry into watching the film. Cool, man. Yeah. I think unless there's anything else to add, we'll probably bow out there. I think we would recommend it, as we said. Wouldn't necessarily say it's an out-and-out scare factor because it's not that. It's very much a different beast. But it is part of Wes Craven's canon of work. People that may be familiar with Scream may want to kind of revisit some of his earlier stuff. And if so, definitely check out People Under the Stairs. And
definitely.
What it does, I think it is an interesting film in its own right. And it gained a cult following as well, I feel, as well, which, again, says a lot. Wes Craven at this point in his career is when he's... he hit his stride, and he was definitely kind of coming into his own around this period, I feel. So I would definitely recommend it. Cool, man. I think on that note, let's bow out. Thanks again for joining us on board. Do remember, kids, that are listening to us out there, to go and check out Nick Alford and his Watch It Wombat team, particularly the Instagram kind of stuff that we were mentioning before with the reviews and stuff that these guys churn out. They're some solid guys, and the reviews are always honest and frank. So thanks again for joining us to discuss this one, Nick. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, mate.
Until then, keep on listening to the podcast, and we're always grateful to have you on board and listening to us. I'm your host, Saul. Catch you again. Cheers.
You're listening to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Music supplied by Peter Nezik. For more discussions or podcasts, head over to surgeonsofhorror.com or head over to our Facebook and Twitter sites for the latest news and updates.